I know how freaking difficult it can be to turn those juicy riffs you've been working on into fully fledged songs. So I'm super hyped to share with you guys today 10 of my best tips for how to get over that creative slump and turn yourself into a metal songwriting pro. But I thought metal was all about riffs. Of course, but if you really dig deep, then you'll find that the vast majority of riffs out there are still based around chords and chord progressions. Very little music is actually truly atonal, and the vast majority of songs out there can still be broken down into some kind of harmonic analysis. And once you realize this and everything clicks, then you'll find that it becomes much easier to write riffs and learn how to string them together in a coherent manner. For sure, most of the songs I write start life as very basic chord progressions that I then build upon. Let me show you exactly what I mean. So first, we come up with a chord progression. I'm going to keep things pretty basic for this example and just use a standard E minor to B major progression. So we know the progression starts on E minor, so that'll be our starting point. Now I'm going to play around a bit and try and come up with a riff idea that uses the notes of this chord plus any extra notes around it that happen to work. Alright, I'm pretty happy with that, so now the next chord in the progression is B. So even though there's a B here that's much nearer, I much prefer the sound of staying on these strings, so I'm going to use this B down here. Just like how I did with the E minor, I'm now going to come up with the next section of the riff that makes use of this B and any other notes around it that sound good. And there we have it. Now all that's left is to join them both together and practice our new complete riff. Alright guys, so if there's one takeaway I want you to get from this lesson, it's that do not underestimate the power of chords. Expanding your chord knowledge organically improves so many aspects of your guitar playing and your overall musicality, not just your songwriting. So from my experience, many metal musicians out there tend to view the word hook as like a dirty word that sort of only belongs in the world of pop music and mainstream music. But let me tell you right now, that is just so wrong and ignorant. Literally any style of music on the planet has hooks in it, whether it's like death metal, black metal, ska, trap, baroque, everything has hooks in. A hook, by definition, is pretty much just a musical idea in a song that is particularly memorable. You want to fill your songs with as many hooks as possible to increase the chances of the listener wanting to come back and listen to it over and over again. Now, how to write a good hook is something that's very hard to teach because the idea of what a good hook is incredibly subjective and abstract. It could be a riff. It could be a vocal melody. It could be a guitar lead line. Or even something more rhythmic, like a drum beat or a drum fill. So it seems to be the case that a lot of the most famous hooks throughout history have just sort of like manifested themselves randomly in spontaneous moments of inspiration. And I can tell you from my personal songwriting experience that this is definitely the case. So I think the best piece of advice I can give when it comes to this sort of stuff is to just be writing as much as you can and listening to a lot of music, lots of different types of music, and just absorbing as much musical information as you physically can. And you'll find that the more you write and the more you listen, that, as you write songs, these hooks will just sort of like come out organically. So trust me, if you're really invested in wanting to become a great songwriter, then if you just keep listening and keep writing, the hooks will come, I promise. So this is a trick used in pop songwriting, but can be applied to pretty much every genre of music, even metal. Right, so every major and minor chord have a relative chord of its opposite. For example, every major chord has a relative minor chord, and every minor chord has a relative major chord. And these relative chords sound quite close to each other due to the fact they share two notes, which means that you can somewhat use them interchangeably. But how exactly do you work out what the relative chord of a chord is? Easy! The relative major chord of a minor chord can be found by simply just going up 3 steps from the root, and conversely, the relative minor chord of a major chord can be found by going down 3 steps from the root. For example, let's take an A minor chord. So if you go up 3 steps from A, you get A sharp, B, C. So C major is the relative major chord of A minor. And conversely, if you go down 3 steps from C, you get to A. So A minor is the relative of C major. You can hear that C major sounds very similar to A minor, but it just has like a slight lift to it. And it's this little lift that you can use to your advantage in your songwriting. For example, let's say you have a song that you've written and it's in the key of A minor. And in all of the sections so far, your intro, verse, pre-chorus or whatever, they're all just like sort of firmly centered around A minor. So instead of just continuing to stick to A minor in the chorus like the rest of the song and, you know, just making everything sound a bit sort of like monotone and repetitive, then you can switch to a riff or a chord sequence in the chorus that's centered around C major instead of A minor. Doing this is a really effective way of giving your chorus that extra bit of energy and lift that it really needs without sort of like drastically altering the tonal center of the song. I know a lot of guitarists, especially younger ones, really like to write music with Guitar Pro, either transcribing everything meticulously as they go, or just flat out writing music on it without even a guitar in their hand. And while it may seem like a smart idea, I really would not recommend this approach generally. So first off, using transcribing software as your primary tool to write music has been proven time and time again to actively hinder creativity, and it kind of encourages you to write in a very robotic, automatic, muscle memory fueled way. If you're composing music on Guitar Pro without a guitar physically with you at the time, then you're much more likely to fall back on your comfort licks, your comfort riffs, just stuff that you generally have memorized already because it's just a lot less effort to input, right? I've also noticed that guitarists writing solos in this manner tend to write everything very sort of like straight and metronomically. For example, like just endless 16th note runs or endless triplet runs without any sort of like rhythmic variation. It makes sense, right? Because it's way easier just to sort of like spam input lots of notes in a row rather than sort of like meticulously think out variances in rhythms, which is A, a lot slower, and B, a lot more difficult to like picture in your head. When students of mine have showed me songs that they've written like exclusively on Guitar Pro without much use of an actual instrument, then 9 times out of 10, there's just like very little use of dotted notes, ties, rests, tuplets, and things like that, you know? Everything is generally just very straight. And even if you're not writing this way, and you're just writing, you know, regularly with a guitar in your hand, but you're insisting on transcribing everything as you go, then I don't really think that's very good either, because you're just creating this sort of like artificial creative barrier that doesn't need to be there at all. When you're writing music, you really need to be 100% present in the moment and in the zone, and just be avoiding any and all distractions possible. It's exactly the same as if you were to be doing normal writing, you know, like writing, I don't know, a book or an article or something, right? And the primary objective when you're writing is just to get words onto the page, You don't want to be wasting time going back over like all the grammar and stuff and the spelling and making sure everything's like pristine and immaculate, because the more you do that, the more it detracts from the actual creativity. You just have to be 100% focused in manifesting those notes into the real world, and that's it. However, if you're wanting to archive your ideas so you don't forget them, then the best option by far is to just record them into a DAW. Just hit record and then bash out all of your ideas that you physically can. Transcribing and cleaning things up and expanding ideas and stuff, that's all things to be done at a later date and not in the moment when writing. Right, so I know as a guitarist, it's extremely tempting to only concern yourself and fixate on the guitar-related parts of a song when writing. But if you really want to be a pro songwriter and write the best possible songs you can, then you really have to get out of that mindset and pay some mind to the vocals as well as you're writing. For me personally, it's extremely jarring when I hear a song where it's just like so obvious that the vocals were just slapped on as a mere afterthought. I know for the most part metal is a guitar-driven genre, but I really cannot stress enough how important vocals are when it comes to writing memorable songs. I mean, we can all probably think of a bunch of examples of songs, right, where you just kind of like skip to one specific section, like the solo or something, because, I don't know, the rest of the song just isn't particularly interesting or kind of boring, you know? I mean, don't you think that's just a massive wasted opportunity of a song? But on the flip side, think about songs like Tornado of Souls, Painkiller, Through the Fire and Flames. What do all these songs have in common? So these are all songs that are centered around big, epic, ripping guitar solos, but they've still had a hell of a lot of thought put into the other sections of the song, and not just the solo. So yes, even though the songs are based around the guitar solos really, they're still a complete cohesive package. Put as much thought into the vocals as you do the more guitar-y based parts of the song, and I guarantee your songwriting will reflect that. A great tip for doing this is to write some very, very rough demo lyrics as you go with writing the guitar parts, to ensure that there's going to be ample room to fit all the vocals in, to prevent you from having to come back later on and rewrite and rearrange a load of shit because the vocals don't fit or whatever. And remember guys, you absolutely do not have to be a proper vocalist to be able to do this, okay? Literally just making some very rough recordings of your voice, like talking or humming or muttering along or something, is ample. It's really more than enough. Like I mentioned with hooks earlier, the words standard song structure seemingly invoke feelings of horror and extreme disdain amongst metal fans who seem to equate these words with, you know, mainstream pop music or chart music or whatever. Well, here's a wake-up call, folks. Even the most heaviest, disgusting extreme metal known to man still uses standard song structures, okay? Take a listen to some songs from some of your favorite bands, and I guarantee you'll find that the majority of them still somewhat fit into the rough framework of verse, chorus, instrumental, chorus, whatever, right? Cannibal Corpse has choruses, Burzum has choruses, Lorna Shore has choruses, and do you know why that is? Because it fucking works, okay? So unless you're an extremely experienced, competent songwriter, I really would not recommend deviating too much from this formula. A lot of metal musicians seem to equate having, you know, long, sprawling, nonsensical song structures with being like all really big-brained. But in my opinion, that is really not the case at all most of the time. Absolutely anybody can string together a bunch of random riffs with no real sense of order or purpose or structure or flow. But writing a decent, highly memorable, coherent song in the standard verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, whatever structure is actually really difficult and takes a hell of a lot of practice. So guys, while you're honing your songwriting craft, please be very conscious of not letting your songs turn into a spaghettified mess of random, unrelated ideas with barely any repeating sections. Do not be afraid of sticking to the tried and tested formula. And remember, just because you use a formula, it does not automatically make your song formulaic. You know, the idea of following a formula and something being formulaic, you know, those are two different concepts, right? Even the most technical, craziest music in the world can still follow a conventional verse-chorus structure. Trust me, guys, your average listener absolutely loves repeating sections, and they're integral to getting them coming back to your song over and over again and smashing that replay button. From my experience, a lot of less seasoned metal guitarists are very fixated on the idea of writing super long songs with very, very long, drawn-out intros. When I used to do a song feedback segment on my channel ages and ages ago, I was absolutely gobsmacked by how many of the songs I'd received would just have these aimless, super, super long, clean intros that like don't really go anywhere or do anything. So I know that super long progressive songs can be pretty cool, but they're just not a practical format to write in when you're trying to hone your songwriting skills. Right now, your main focus should be on getting super comfortable with writing coherent, memorable songs in a standard structure. So do yourself a favor, guys, stop arsing around, wasting time with extended clean intros. No, stop it. Instead, front load some of your best ideas into the very start of the song and start them right off the bat. In this age of oversaturation in the industry and raging competition, you need to get the listener's attention straight away. You cannot be messing about. So promise me, okay? No more clean intros unless they are absolutely necessary. By far, one of the most common bits of feedback I end up giving my students who come at me with their songs is to stop making your songs sound so monotone. Many of the songs that I get shown don't really have distinguishable parts like the intro, verse, chorus, bridge, or whatever. They all sort of like just blend into each other and it's like very flat. Like there's no drama, no changes in like energy or dynamics or anything. It's extremely, extremely important to give each section of your song a specific purpose and a specific flavor and not just have your song sound like one big fucking block of riffs. So to show you exactly what I'm bleating on about, I'm about to show you 2 examples of songs that I've recorded. One of them is going to be very monotone and one of them isn't. So have a listen, pay attention and really try to take note of these differences between the first song and the second song. So hopefully you noticed there how I achieved a much more dynamic sounding song in the second example by following some very, very easy basic techniques. Rhythmic variation, making the guitars more open and closed between sections, making the drums more open and closed between sections and switching the drum beats up. As you can see, all of these very small changes amount to a lot when you apply them all together. So modulation is just a fancy formal term for the technique of switching keys mid-song. For example, if you have a riff like this that's firmly based in the key of E minor, you could modulate to F sharp minor by playing the same riff but just up 2 steps, so that the tonal center is now F sharp, not E. Modulations are a great way to add some extra drama to your song and to throw the listener a little curveball by refreshing their listening palette. As you probably know, in traditional songwriting, modulations are often used in the last chorus of a song or something to give it that sort of big epic climactic raise at the end or whatever. But you can actually use modulations in so many different scenarios. Let me show you. Changing key for the solo. Or if you're doing multiple solos, you could change keys between them. Changing key for every chorus. Changing the key of a riff during a verse. The one problem with modulations that you really need to be aware of, right, is that it can be very easy to write yourself into a corner with them and for things to get a little messy. If you do want to change key in a section, then you do need to have an escape plan. Like, you need to think how you're going to get back to your original key after you do it, so that you're not just like stuck in this new key for the remainder of the song, unless that's your intention, of course. So, you have your semi-finished song in front of you. You're generally pretty happy with it, but it's just lacking a certain something, but you're not quite sure what it is. But what exactly is the key to really bringing your songs to life and making your arrangements pop? And when I say layers, right, I don't necessarily mean like adding a fucking 50-piece orchestra over everything, unless you want to, of course. But knowing what and when to add is one of those high-level songwriting skills that really sets the, the noobs apart from the pros, right? Let's look at a practical example so you can see what I'm talking about. So here's a chorus section I've come up with for a potential song. Sounds alright, I guess, but doesn't really sound big and dramatic enough for a chorus, so I think I'm going to add some layers to really make things pop. The possibilities for things to add as layers is obviously endless, but some commonly used ideas that could be very effective in your songs are things like saturated delay guitars, wah-wah overdubs, synth lines doubling guitar lines, background vocals, guitar lead lines and harmonies, extra drums or percussion or sub-drops during heavy bits like breakdowns and stuff. But all that being said, half of the skill is also knowing when not to go mad with layering and to leave things more minimal and bare. Because after all, good songwriting is all about dynamics, contrast, and tension and release. So, not really much to say here besides finish your damn songs! So I know that one of the tropes of being a creative or an artiste or whatever is to have a whole hard drive backed up full of half-baked, unfinished song ideas and stuff. But that does not have to be you. And while this is fine and all part of the learning process, of course, you do, however, learn a lot more by actually finishing songs and projects. And remember that just because you finish a song, it doesn't mean that you actually have to, use it for something, right? You don't have to release every single song you finish, right? That's stupid. It's just very, very important that you get into the habit and the discipline of actually finishing projects. And if anything, it's just great for your confidence as a songwriter and as a musician. And when the day comes when inspiration hits and you have a winning song on your hand, you won't be hampered by these insecurities, about being anxious or worried about not being able to finish the song, will I be able to see it through? I don't know, is it worth the time investment? Because you won't think like that because you will have already had practice in seeing projects through from start to finish. So yeah, finish your damn songs! To get tabs, backing tracks, and a lesson for this video, as well as a sick selection of super fun guitar workouts, courses, ebooks, and weekly mentoring from me, then click the link in the description below to visit Bradley Hall's Guitar School and sign up today for free. Cheers guys, and happy shredding.